I'm sure you've seen myself and others here on YouTube use a variety of keyboard shortcuts when you're working in Photoshop. Now, a simple keyboard shortcut can save you a ton of time over the long haul. The trick is to know which ones are the most useful and how and when to use them. I'm going to show you my top 20 Photoshop shortcuts that I think everyone should know. Hi, I'm Terry Vanderheiden, professional photographer, and I realized a long time ago that taking a moment to learn some of the most used shortcuts in Photoshop will save you a lot of time over the course of a project. There are lots of keyboard shortcuts in Photoshop, and can you really learn all of them? Well, the answer is yes, but you don't really have to. I'm going to show you my top 20 shortcuts in Photoshop that I use every day while working on images. Now, there are others to learn for sure. In fact, if you stay tuned, I'll give you a link to get my free download of the top 60 shortcuts for both Mac and PC for Photoshop. To learn a keyboard shortcut, I found the best way is to use it. When you're tempted to go into the menu for a function, take a second to look at the shortcut list and find the shortcut and use it. Do this at every opportunity and you'll memorize all of them in no time. So a lot of the most common shortcuts you probably already know, and we already touched on it a second ago where we went File, New, right? We're not going to do it that way anymore. We're going to just hit the Command N, and that'll bring us up a new document. So remember, I'm on a Mac here, so anytime I say Command, the PC version is Control. So hopefully I'll keep up with you on that. And on my list that you can download for free, that'll have both PC and Mac shortcuts written right there. So another one you know already is, let's say we're going to make a selection of something and we do Command C. That's going to copy, right? Command C is going to copy, and we come over to a new file. We do Command V and that'll paste it. So Command C, Command V, those are all the same. They do the exact same functions that we're used to. And if we wanted to take an image, let's say we'll do another selection inside of a selection. And if we wanted to remove that, we would do Command X, and that would cut that. So it does save it to the clipboard. So if you want to paste it somewhere else, you can. So let's go over here. We can just do that right here and do Command V, and you'll see that that pastes that other little piece if we wanted to do that. So those most common shortcuts, Command or Control N, Control C, Command X, Command V, those are all typical ones that you're used to. One of the things that Photoshop offers, and you're probably also used to, is the undo, and that's Command Z or Control Z on the PC. So Command Z will just undo that last step. But Photoshop has added something that's pretty slick, and that's the undo of the redo. So here's how it works. You do Option, Command Z, and that will redo what you just undid. So that's pretty handy if you need to go back in time and fix something. Say you undid something and you wished you didn't. It's a perfect way to get back to it. That's Option, Command Z, or Control Alt Z, and that will undo the redo of the undo. Does that make sense? Probably not. But suffice to say, it can redo any kind of undo if you undo the redo. There's a couple of other shortcuts you probably already know, and that's Command W. That will typically close a file on most programs. So if you do that, then of course the save or don't save is going to come up. You can also do Command Q, which will be quitting the entire program. That turns off the entire program. And when you go to do that, if you do Command Q, again, it's going to ask you if you need to save these things that you've already got going. Command Q or Control Q. Remember, just substitute Command for Control and you'll get your PC shortcut right away. Let's say you got a file that you just want to save. And so you can just hit Command S, that'll save it. It actually, if you brought it out of Lightroom, it'll save it back into Lightroom. But if you made changes on it, like this one here, we made some changes on it, and we go to hit Save, that'll be Command S. It will come up, you'll see here, it comes up as a Save As. And interesting to know, in Photoshop, when you do a Save As, you only have a few choices. That's a Photoshop PDF, a large document, or a TIFF. So it's trying to save all of your layers. It's not really trying to consider all the other file formats that you can save in. So save as will get you just one of those options. And generally, you're just going to be saving it as a PSD. So let's say we did some changes on this and we wanted to save as. The way we do it is we do Shift Command S, and that'll bring up the save as no matter what we do, no matter what we've done to that image. So save as is pretty accessible. So you're going to want to use this when you're taking a file and you're going to, let's say you've made a version of it and you're going to save it as. So maybe it's going to be document 002 or something. That's where you're going to use save as, because you're probably going to save it as a Photoshop file. But let's say you want to save it as a JPEG, for instance. You want to export it, right? So you see this down here, this is save as a copy. So you can click on that and then you have the ability to pull down and get all of your files. But a lot of times when you're in a file and you're saying, oh, I want to save this as a JPEG, the way you do that is you do Option Command S. It's a keyboard shortcut, and that brings up save as a copy. So I think I use this quite a bit more. You know, I'll save my files as I go, but a lot of times when I'm done with a file, I'm going to save it out as a JPEG. So I'm saving it as a JPEG or a PNG, something like that. You get all your choices here when you do that. So save a copy as is something that you're going to probably want to use a lot. And again, that shortcut is Option Command S or Control Alt S, and that'll save as a copy. When you have your file open, a lot of times there's going to be a situation where you're going to want to select everything on that layer. So let's go ahead and select everything on the layer. And the real simple way to do that is Command A, and that selects everything inside the layer. In fact, if you look close, you can see the little marching ants that are going around the entire file, all right, inside this whole thing. So that's Command A or Control A will select everything. So now I've made a selection of just this little microphone, and we'll zoom in on it here. You can see the marching ants going around, and this is just a selection that we're going to do, right? So we know this from a lot of these past lessons. One of my favorite shortcuts is Command J. So Command J will put that up onto its own layer. Probably a little hard to see, but there's a checkerboard behind this because this is just all that we had selected that will put it up there. Now, another thing that you can do, if you're on a layer and you want to just duplicate a layer, that's also Command J. So it's a dual use type of a shortcut that I think you're going to get a lot of use out of. So Command J or Control J, that will copy either the whole layer or send whatever selection up to its own new layer. As we zoomed up on this, we can see that this is selected because we have these little marching ants going around. But occasionally those little marching ants can be a little distracting as to whether you've really got your selection exactly right, or if you're doing a function, for instance. So let's go ahead and grab a new color down here. We're going to go ahead and grab green. And we can see down here in our color palette, we have green as our foreground and white as our background. And we're going to take our paintbrush, grab the paintbrush, and now when we paint, we can only paint inside of the selection. So we're only working on that part of the selection. So if we wanted to hide this selection so we don't have to see it, the keyboard shortcut is Command H or Control H. Now, we don't see a selection there, but yet when we go to do any work on it, we know that there's a selection there. Now, this is a kind of a cautionary type of a shortcut. Well, while it's really great because a lot of times those marching ants can be distracting, especially when you're doing something fine and close up, you want to make sure that when you're done with it, you go ahead and toggle that back on. And the reason is because there'll be times where you're working on a file and you're like, wow, I just can't seem to get this thing. I don't know what I'm trying to paint on it, but it won't let me. And the reason a lot of times is you have a selection somewhere on your file, and that's not allowing you, it's only going to allow you to work inside of that selection. So it's not allowing you to do the work that you want to do. So in order to combat that, double check. If you get in that situation, double check that you have Command H hasn't been already functioned and is hiding your selection. So hiding a selection, Command H, bringing it back, Command H. So it's a toggle switch. And again, this can get you in a little bit of trouble when you're trying to work on something. It can be exasperating. Nothing is going to be too detrimental, but it can be exasperating if let's say you're trying to work over in this section and you've got this hidden and you go to paint. Well, I'm not allowed to paint over there because I'm only allowed to paint inside of this selection, and I don't realize it's on because the marching ants are away. So use that sparingly, but I think you'll like it because it's really great to turn it on, turn it off. And that's really the bottom line. Use it as a toggle. Turn it off, turn it on. Now, another thing that you can do here in Photoshop that's a nice shortcut is sometimes we want to work outside of our selection. Exactly. So we've done all this work to make a really nice selection, and we want to paint. Let's say we're painting with green here, and we'd like to paint on the outside of this. So let's go ahead and change our color here, and we'll change it to red, for instance. And now we want to paint on the outside. Well, look, we can't paint on the outside, right? Because we have that selection. A quick way to fix that is Shift, Command, I. And that's going to invert that selection exactly. And you'll see up here that the marching ants are all around up here. Now look what happens. When we paint, we can only paint anything but what we originally selected. So that's invert the selection, Shift, Command, I, or Shift, Control, I. We'll invert it. And again, that's a toggle switch. So that goes on and off depending on what position you're in. Right now we've selected everything but Shift, Command, I. Now we're back to just the selection. Another handy shortcut that you're going to use all the time is, let's say you've got a selection, you're done doing your work on it, and you want to do work on some other part of the image, but of course you can't because the selection's active. You need to turn off the selection completely. And the way to do that is deselect. Simple way to remember it, Command D. That turns that off. D for deselect. Command D turns it off. If you're enjoying this kind of content, take a second to hit the like button and remember to hit subscribe, and then ring the little bell to be reminded of my next video. Now, if you'd like to get your own list of my top 60 shortcuts to Photoshop, go to imagelight.com and click on freebies, and then type in your name and email address, and I'll send you a list to print out, and you can have it right next to your computer as you work. I'll also put you on my mailing list and remind you in an email about anything new I'm involved with. Mostly it's going to be about letting you know I've got a new video that's published, or equipment or techniques that I'm using. I'll also put a link to my shortcuts list in the description below, so you can head over there right after watching the video. Down here in this section are our default colors. So whenever we want to see our default colors, this is where they're going to reside. And depending on what you want to paint with, if we wanted to change this black to some other color, let's go ahead and put that to green again. We'll click OK. And now our foreground color is green, so we know that we can paint with green. Our background color is white. Let's go ahead and reverse those. That's what that little arrow does. When we click on this, we can change that to a different color red, for instance. And now we can paint with red because that's the foreground color. And if we want to switch those colors, if we're going back and forth, the keyboard shortcut is X. So that's X, and we can flip back and forth and change whatever color we want. Now, when we're in this situation and we've got these colors all set, let's say we want to get back to our black and white. Well, to black and white, you just hit the letter D, and then now we're back to our default colors. So whenever you want your default colors, you use D, and whenever you want to switch them, you use X, and that'll switch those two colors back and forth. All right, we've created a couple more colors down here. So let's say, for instance, we want to fill a complete layer. So let's say we're going to make a new layer. We just click right there and we make a new layer. And let's say we want to fill it. Well, one of the ways is to go up here, go to Edit, and then come down here to Fill. And that will give us an option of where we want to fill. Okay, what color do we want? We want the foreground color. We click OK, and now we've filled that with blue. An easier way, a much easier way, is learn the shortcut. And the shortcut is pretty simple. If we want to fill with our foreground color, we hold the Option key down, or Alt if you're on a PC, and then hit Delete. And that fills that whole layer with whatever your foreground color is down here. So let's do that again. That's Option or Alt, and then Delete, or backspace if you're on the PC, fills it with that foreground color. Foreground color meaning the color that's on top. Now, if we want to fill it with the background color, which is down below it, all we have to do is do Command Delete. and that will fill it with that color, or Control backspace on the PC. So those are two options to really quickly fill a layer, or if you want to fill something in particular. So let's go like this. If we were going to make a new layer and we make a box over here, that's now a selection, and we just want to fill that. We do Option Delete, and that fills it with whatever color is in the foreground. So there's a couple ways that you can fill really quickly by learning that shortcut. And you know, truthfully, I've been in situations where it's like, okay, which one is it fills the background color? Well, in a real simple way, I can do this and say, oh, no, I wanted the blue. Okay, I know it's the other key. It's that modifier key, the Option or the Command or the Alt or the Control. I know it's that Option key, that it's a modifier key for whatever it is I'm doing. So pretty simple. If you don't get it right the first time, it takes a second to do the next one. We have the same image here. This is just that microphone on its own background. Now let's say we'd like to modify this somehow. We want to change it a little bit. Well, a simple way to do that is you go up to Edit, then come down here to Transform, and then you can figure out whichever thing you want to transform. That's too much work. Let's do the shortcut. Shortcut is Command T. That brings a bounding box around it, and now you can change the size, and you can turn it and do whatever it is that you want to do with it. You can move it, you can do whatever. And this gives you, you're a little limited though. So right off the top, you can change the size without changing its proportions, or you can rotate it. But if you right click inside, now you've got access to all these other tools like Distort and Perspective. So on Distort, if we wanted to make this smaller and do something different with it, we can do that. So real simple, you can do Command T or Control T, and that gives you this box that allows you to transform whatever it is you want. So real quickly, you can transform by just using the size, or you can distort by clicking in here and telling it, oh, you'd want to skew it. Then that's going to give you a different type of a view. So it's a real simple way to get into the transform. That's Command T or Control T. Get you right in there, and for more variety, just right click inside that box and you can have access to all those tools of the transform. If we're going to alter an image somehow, let's say we want to darken this microphone that we've set on top of this scenic. If we wanted to do that, and we came over here to the normal way that I would teach you how to do it, which is an adjustment layer. And if you'd like to learn about adjustment layers, I have a whole video on how to use adjustment layers that I'll put a link to it. But let's say, for instance, we go to Levels, and then our Levels dialog box comes up, and we start to make the sliders. Well, this adjustment layer affects everything below it. So that's really not what we're looking for. So we want to adjust just that layer. So let's undo this. Come up here, go to Image, Adjustments, and then go to Levels. But we want to use a shortcut. So the shortcut is Command L or Control L. Now that brings up a little dialog box, same one that we saw before. And now when we move the sliders, we're just affecting that one layer. So you'll find this to be pretty handy from time to time. You just want to do a quick little adjustment on just that layer, something real simple, especially if it's a layer like this where you've got a transparent background. You want to just affect that, and you don't want it affecting everything else that you do. This is a really great way to go. There are several different image adjustments you can do, and let's say here's another one, Command U. That's going to give you the hue and saturation slider box, and you can just take the color out of something if you want. You can enhance the color and bring it up. Of course, you can change your hues and your tones if you'd like to do that. Another one that we use a lot is Command B, which is color balance. This enables you to just go in and color balance that one layer that you're working on, and you have the ability to work in the highlights or the shadows, whatever you want to do. All the slider boxes right there. That's Command B or Control B for color balance. Then if you'd like to use curves, that's Command M. That'll bring up the curves dialog box, and you're able to go in and create curves and do whatever it is that you want to do with the curves, and that will be affecting only the layer that you have highlighted. So those are some quick ones. Command L, Command U, Command M, and Command B will all get you these different image adjustments. So lastly, you're in layers and you want to work with layers and you want some shortcuts for layers. Well, the main one that we've done before, you make a selection and hit Command or Control J, and that puts that up onto its own layer, which is great. And let's say, for instance, we're going to use another command we just learned, Command L. That's going to work on just the layer right there. See how we can darken that? We're only working with that layer, not the whole thing. So let's say you've done all this work already and you're saying, okay, I like everything the way it is, but I'm going to go into another method now, so I want to just save everything as it is. So the way to do that is to make all of these layers, so in this case I've got a ton of them, all these layers into one combo layer is what I call it. And the combo layer is simply done with this shortcut. It's the biggest shortcut you'll have to learn, but it's worth it. It's Shift, Option, Command, and the letter E. And what that does is takes all of the layers that are visible down below it and puts them all into one big combo layer. So pretty simple. Shift, Command, Option, E. Or if you're on a PC, it's Shift, Alt, Control, E. And that makes a complete combo layer of everything below it. You're going to find that to be really handy. So that's definitely worth learning. I know that it's kind of a lot to learn, but once you learn that, you'll use it all the time when you're working with your layers. Next time, I'm going to go over all the tool shortcuts. You're going to want to learn those as well. I'll also show you how to make your own shortcuts so you can customize the list to do exactly what you want. See you next time.